All right. So basically, the reading material, even though we're not going to go through the whole chapter, it's based on, I think it's book 3, chapter 4, titled Diagnosis. Who here was able to read this chapter, or at least scan through it, just to see some of the data that's in this chapter? No one read it?
What book was that, brother?
That's book 1, Dianetics book 1. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
Dianetics book 1. Well, let me throw this question out. Sister Kalisa, did I say it right? Sister Kalisa?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Since this is your first time with us, do you have any questions with regards to what we do and how we do it?
I'm just observing.
Okay. Basically, what we're doing is, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan had made a statement. I can't quite remember where the statement was made, but he mentioned a marriage between the supreme wisdom and the supreme tech. And there's a video where he made the statement about the Dianetics is a tool that we can use to open up what we received of the supreme wisdom, which was like a safe that contained riches, but we forgot the combination. Have you ever heard that before?
I didn't hear it quite like that.
Okay. What I'll do is I'll play that video at the very end, because it's not a long video. I'll play that video at the end so we can actually see and hear the minister's words exactly as he made them. And what we do is we do word clearing on the Holy Quran, and we have been blessed to be able to find the tech of Dianetics actually in the Holy Quran. So as we study the Dianetics, the minister wanted us to bring that tech back, but bring it back in our own language. So the purpose of what we do on Sundays and Wednesdays is we look through the tech, we connect it with the Supreme Wisdom, our problem book, and the Holy Quran, and we translate that information from the tech of Dianetics into our language, so that when we now share this with the believers, we can share it in our language. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. So we're gonna go over just, I think it's maybe 3 little paragraphs. But in these 3 paragraphs, there's some real interesting information that I was blessed to find. We're gonna use a little bit of mathematics as a demo kit, but if you can't follow the mathematics, don't sweat it. We'll go more into detail with regards to the mathematical aspect on Wednesday. But I want us to understand the concept of this optimum mental state and how we're going to connect it with our self-improvement study guides. Okay, does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we're going to connect, and that's for everyone. As we always do, we connect the tech with our lessons, with the self-improvement study guides, and we're really taking everything and bringing it together to use it in a way and to have it what's called a synergistic effect. And I'll explain what that is as well. But let's look at what we're looking at is book 3. So it's chapter 4, book 3, and it's pages 221 to 238. We're not going to go through all those pages. We're only going to go through one little aspect of it. Okay. Someone else entered in. Okay. So the question is, what is the optimum mental state? If you look on page 14, okay, we got a little bit of feedback going. Okay. On page 14, L. Ron Hubbard says that the clear possesses attributes fundamental and inherent, but not always available in an uncleared state, which have not been suspected of man and are not included in past discussions and his abilities and behavior. Now, when you look at this statement and you see the statement, the clear possesses attributes fundamental and inherent, but not always available in an uncleared state, what are some of the things that come to your mind? Anyone?
For me, one thing that I gained was a faster processing ability from a single session, which was about an hour.
Okay.
So in terms of ability, that was a direct ability, and I still have it. Like I'm able to grasp things faster and deeper. So that's one thing that came to mind.
Okay, so now if you had to describe that as an attribute based on maybe one word, what attribute could you use to describe that ability?
Capacity comes to mind, but maybe 2 words would be better: increased capacity.
Okay.
Because it really has applied quite generally, like
okay,
whether it's patience or ability to read something and grasp it. It's quite
there's
incredible.
There's one word: patience. Patience.
Oh, perfect.
Okay, because you see
Thank you,
where
sir.
you see where I'm going with this, right?
I don't, but I'm glad that you lifted that, because that is a central piece that escaped me at the moment. So thank you.
Okay. No, you'll see in a moment. I mean, everything you said is valid, but there's a destination I want us to get to, and you'll understand in a moment. Sister Angela, go ahead.
Yes, sir. I think I'm gonna wait till you get to that destination.
You're gonna wait till when?
Till you get to that destination, a little further into it. I don't
Okay.
want to, you know,
Okay.
color. I don't want to color, so I want to hear more. I'm a little my hand.
Okay. When I originally read this, I completed the Gold Seal back in 2011. But when I read this, one of the first thing that came to my mind was where he says the clear possesses attributes. That was the key. That was one of the first keys. And then by saying that we're fundamental and inherent, but not always available in an uncleared state, I automatically went to the 99 attributes of Allah. So in the language of Dianetics, the clear possesses they possess these attributes that are fundamental and inherent, which means if you look at the word inherent and fundamental, you'll come to another word. The word is innate. Does anyone know what innate means?
Yes, something coming from within.
Something coming
Have
from
we been endowed with?
something we've been exactly something we've been born with. So when he said the clear possesses attributes, I automatically saw God manifested in the form of a person. That's just how I saw it.
Yes, sir. Now I put my hand back up.
Okay, go ahead, Sister Angela.
Okay, so we were on the same page, praise be to Allah. And as you were speaking, I immediately went to the movie Lucy with Scarlett Johansson, whatever her last name is, and that black that she turned,
That black woman she turned into?
that black, how could we say dark matter? You know, that graphite in the universe that you can't see until it's swallowing an object up.
Yes, ma'am.
You know, that invisible dark hole. Invisible is also another word that we call what? Clear.
Go ahead.
All right. So what I noticed in Lucy, I went straight to the attributes too. Our innate ability to be who we truly are is God's. God's didn't have iPhones. God's did not have certain technologies that this world has, and we have to understand the technological advantages that this world has is due to their inability to be a god.
Yes.
And be able to perform these tasks. So when we feel ourselves balancing the pain, because the pain is not to do away with the pain makes us who we are. Allah went through pain to bring himself into existence. So the pain is part of the journey that we have to have balance with. And the biggest attribute, I think, the biggest key, I would say it like that I see auditing has for us is it can help us expedite the process of rising above emotions into the thinking of God.
Mm-hmm.
Because we won't be so caught on the emotion, like for the overwhelming event that's about to happen with the minister. Now, we all been put on high alert.
Mm-hmm.
Some shape, form, or fashion. Everybody, whether we're talking about it or not, every member of the Nation of Islam has a feeling within, because it's a lot of similarities going on that we know we stimulators. These things key us in, so we can be cognizant of this feeling, or we can just go on with our day to day, and that day to day represents for me being occluded. That day to day represents those things that bind us to the pain without mastery. The pain is part of our growth. So once we can get through our day to day knowing that Allah is in control, I don't care how bad a situation is, what it might look like to other people, know that the true and living God that came for us 9,000 miles, he is totally in control. And he, though we may not see it, has the best intentions in mind for us. So we can rest there. That's what the clarity is. The clarity is Master Fard Muhammad is the supreme being. Mm-hmm. In total control. So no matter what weapon formed against us, if we truly can rise to who we are, we thank Allah for the tool that helps us get there. However, like L. Ron Hubbard had to yield. Our solidifying our faith can help us rise even faster than auditing, because we will not fear nothing else but Allah. So that clarity, that innate being connected to the special set of attributes, I said to a sister, it's possible that you have not even met yourself.
Go ahead.
These versions of ourselves are byproducts of a dead world that caused us pain. So that clarity, I mean, Allah has left a lot of breadcrumbs, Brother Lukman, to at least enliven us to take the steps to finding out this can't be it. This cannot, and that's another question. This can't. I work, I go home, I pay my bills. This can't be life. This can't be what it's all about. Because that innate feeling in us, we're natural gods, we're natural builders, we're natural creators. Until that hunger is suffice, it's gonna keep eating at us. But again, we can't address it if we're occluded and aberrated by day to day plus what has happened in the past that we have not settled. So that innate thing that you just read, as beautiful as it is, the road is Master Fard Muhammad's true identity, what he had in mind, and our ability to trust in him 100%. Thank you, sir.
Yes, ma'am. Praise be to Allah. Thank you, Sister Angela.
Praise be to Allah.
If someone has at hand a dictionary, I would need someone to look up a word real quick.
I have my phone.
Please look up the word lucid.
Ooh, I will too. Okay, I got it upside down. Okay, give me 1 minute. If anybody else want to do it, you can.
But you go ahead and look up that word, Sister Angela, and we'll go with Sister Ania since she's got her hand up.
Okay, that's fine.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam, family.
Oh, Sister Angela, that was so powerful.
All praises to Allah.
I have to put some kind of weight on me to bring me back down to earth. But when you asked us the question, what did that little paragraph mean, or what did it make us think of? I immediately thought of study guide number 2, building human potential. And so I pulled out my book real quick to see if there was something in there that I could, contribute on that. And it gives some Quranic references. And the very first one that I looked up talks about man being created from dust. And it says, then from a small life germ, then from a clot, then from a lump of flesh, complete in make and incomplete, that we may make clear to you. And then there's a full stop there, a period. So I thought that was interesting too. That says, so that we may make clear to you. And when you think of dust, when I looked that up, it says a cloud of finely powdered earth or other matter in the air. And it's matter in little fine particles. And then it also says that it covers the surface, so that and so I thought of that when something is covered in dust, it's not clear. And so that's the state that we start off in, but we have this complete but incomplete, and we're in a state of something that is considered worthless, like dust. And then in the study guide number 2, it also refers to another scripture in that we're extracted from the sperm. And it says, sperm issues from the same part of man's body as waste fluid. Therefore it is lowly, even despicable in man's sight. But the sperm is the quintessence of every part of the human body. And sperm, it says, sperm is only worthless because of the state it is in. And then later on it says sperm must be placed in the right environment, that is the womb. And then he goes on to ask us what is the proper environment for spiritual development to take place. So I thought all of that was very relevant to the passage here about the clear possesses attributes. And then you mentioned, Brother Lukman, that the 99 attributes, which are fundamental and inherent in us, is a part of us, but it's the state that it's in is not a clear state. And so work has to be done on that. It has to be developed and polished and cleaned up to become clear, so that we can see clearly. And there was a reference in here to us being brought to a state. See, he says in the Quran, it says, what makes us complete in the spirit of God or a living soul is manifested in the language of the Holy Quran. Once Almighty God has breathed his spirit into man, he ceases to refer to him in the third person, him, and begins to refer to him in the second person, you. He says, and gave you ears and eyes and hearts. Little it is that you give thanks. Man is thus addressed as a spiritual counterpart to whom the Creator has given ears, so that he can hear the message, eyes to see clearly with the vision of a divine being, a heart for love and understanding and compassion. Just wanted to share that.
Oh, praise. Thank you. There's something that came to mind as you were reading, and Sister Kalisa, are you still with us? Sister Kalisa? Hope she's still present.
Yes, brother. I'm here just to let you know I'm actually en route to the hospital to see my father, so I'll be able to listen to you in the car.
Okay. I just had a quick question. What does your name, the name Kalisa mean?
Sincere.
Sincere. And it's KHALEE.
IS. It's Lisa with a KHA.
Okay. Now there's a reason why I asked this, and I won't bother you for the rest of the night. Let me go to Sister Angela for just a minute with the definition for lucid and tie all this together.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead, Sister Angela.
We have the first definition for lucid: expressed clearly, easy to understand. Second definition: bright or luminous. Shall I go further?
Nope, that's all we need. What are the first four letters of the word lucid?
Lucy.
Now here's another one. And this is we're pulling in the spirit of Mother Tanetta Muhammad.
Come on.
This is for everyone, but this is also for Sister Kalisa. In the Holy Quran, in the areas where it talks about the purified ones, it says Satan will lie in wait. He'll get all of those except the purified ones. The purified ones in Arabic is mukhalasim, which comes from the Arabic root word khalasa, which is the root of kalisa, which means purified or to be clear. And to have that connected to you bringing up Lucy and lucid and clear, we're hitting all these clears from different angles. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir. I think even her being en route to the hospital to see her dad, I think that's tied into it also. So praise be to Allah.
Praise be to Allah. Okay. Sister Ania. See, your hand is up.
I think Sister Charlotte's hand was up.
Oh, it was up from before.
Okay. I know I did see Sister Charlotte. Go ahead, Sister Charlotte.
No, I was just going to jump in with the definition in case Sister Angela.
Okay.
But thank you.
All right, so I think we have a full understanding where we're going with this. Attributes. So now what is the optimum goal? Okay, now based on the reading, L. Ron Hubbard says this is page 221. He says, without an optimum goal of conduct or mental state, and without knowledge of the cause of aberration, catalogs of descriptions alone were possible. And these were so involved and contradictory that it was nearly impossible to sharply assign to a psychotic or neurotic any classification which would lead to an understanding of his case. Now let's parse this a little bit. So when you have an optimum goal of conduct or an optimal mental state, if we were to use an equation to speak about this, and as we have been talking about circuits, the goal of something would be the output, correct? Y'all with me?
Absolutely. Yes, sir.
Okay. So the goal would be the output. The cause would be the input, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So what he's saying here is, when you look at the field of psychiatry right now, they don't get into the input or what is causing the mental disorder. 9 times out of 10, they're saying it's either genetic, you're born with it,
Mm-hmm.
or it's a defect. Okay. So right now, psychology doesn't really deal with the actual cause of the aberration,
Right.
nor do they talk about the goal. Because in order to talk about the optimum goal of conduct, the optimum mental state, you would have to be talking about raising a person into the level of God. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
And in the devil's world, he doesn't want God to exist. So in the field that we have of psychiatry, they just put names on stuff. But the name doesn't tell you the cause, nor does it classify the effect. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So when you look at what is the optimal goal and mental state, we're talking, and then what is the cause of aberration? How does one solve the problem? Because in order to solve a problem, if you look at it from a mathematical standpoint, and we're going to do this tonight just on the surface level, if you have a mathematical problem, that mathematical problem has to tell you what is the goal of this problem. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir. Mm-hmm.
Okay, it might say solve for X, or calculate, I have this many apples and this many bananas, how many pieces of fruit do I have? So the thing is, in an equation, you have to be given a destination. This is the end result. And in giving an end result, you have to have an input. There has to be some information that's given to you that is objective. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
So if you don't have one or the other, you can't solve the problem. And that's why when you look at the condition of our people nowadays, the pharmaceutical industry is so blatant,
Mm-hmm.
because all they're doing is they're using chemistry to treat the aberration. They're treating what's wrong, but they're not focused on what's causing it. And they're not trying to actually solve what's really happening. Does that make sense?
It makes sense.
Okay. Brother Wadu, you got your hand up.
Yes, sir, and family. I just wanted to, for clarity for myself, when I see the word goal of conduct or mental state, it seems as though it's written with those being interchangeable, where we know that conduct, if we look at what conduct means in terms of action, of a human's actions, then we know that all actions of the human take place from some thought, which I would equate to the mental state, that thought precedes action. And that's borne out even in the medical realm. If we think about how the body moves or functions, even if we are consciously unaware of it, there was a source in the mind that caused the action of the body. If you want to raise your hand to answer a question, you first had to think about raising your hand before we literally are able to make the body, arm and hand, go up into the air to raise our hand. So I just wanted to ask, for the sake of clarity, am I thinking of those terms in the proper orientation as they are given, goal of conduct or mental state? Or is there another way that I should also be looking at that?
That's a good question. When you in mathematics, when you deal with logic, and you deal with what's called the truth trees, and you deal with mathematical proofs, you have what's called inclusive or and exclusive or. And I'll give you a quick example. If you go out to eat and they say that you can get a salad or a baked potato, that or could mean that you can actually get both. You can get the salad or the baked potato. Both of those options are available to you. You don't necessarily have to take both, but you can. But then another type of or would be that you can only have the salad or the baked potato. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so it's called inclusive or and exclusive or, where one, if we say look at question number 2 of our student enrollment. Okay, Caucasian white man or Yakub's grafted devil. Because really, when you look at Yakub's grafted devil, that could be talking about us, correct?
Yes.
Because we're not righteous yet. Does that make any sense?
Yes.
I mean, we're not.
Absolutely.
Let me make sure we get this correct. We're not the original man yet, but we have that potential, correct?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
We're like in between. We're in between lesson number 2 and lesson number 1 of the student enrollment, if that makes any sense. We're not this, but we haven't quite arrived there yet. And that's
Yes,
based
sir.
on the word or, okay? So or is inclusive or exclusive. Go ahead, Sister Denise.
Alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
Assalamu alaikum. I have to put that on there. Yes, sir. As you all were talking and I was reading about this optimum health, when I was in the mental health field, I worked real close with a psychiatrist. I thought that once he prescribed the medications for the patients, that that was supposed to sort of stabilize, where they could. Our program was called Adapt, and we had to help them adapt to their environment with medications and different programming that we did with them, one-on-one, reality orientation, different things like that. And I thought, so when the psychiatrist came to the place to see them, everybody was okay. Everybody was mellow. Wasn't no outbursts, no aberrations, none of that. And so I'm thinking, okay, this is where they want them. And he saw all of them, and they were, how you doing, doctor? And speaking in the present time. And I'm thinking, this is what we've been trying to get to, right? And he went and he took all of them off of their medication, every last one of them. And I said, he said, yeah, all of them off their medication. I said, why did you do that? I thought that was the optimum goal or the end result is everybody stable. He said, if I do that, they wouldn't need me. I said, they wouldn't need you. No. Well, they need a doctor for if the medicine is stabilized. I said, but you knew which medicine they took, and he said, no, then I'm obsolete. And I say, so you would rather see them mentally unstable, not optimum, just always having a problem, because that's who I am. The problem solved. And I just put them on the medication, and once they get stable, I cut it down or cut them off completely, which is what he did, because that's not normal when you're normal to him. So, no aberrations. And I had to sort of look at that in another light, as are you a helper or a herder? Are you an angel or are you a demon? Just for the Ishmael subject today, because I couldn't understand why, if that's the goal and we reached it, where do we go from there? Then eventually they won't need me. Then they'll know how to manage their own lives, and then I'm out of a patient or job, So, I mean, is there a different way to look at that besides that's the devil? I mean, I'm not sure. I just couldn't understand why he took them off. I mean, I understood why, because he said he wouldn't have a job, but I guess that's why the Scientologists they fight so hard dealing with the mental health because no one wants to see you uh the uh the original man, the God of the universe. Nobody wants to see the God.
Mhm. That's right.
That's what I'm thinking. No one wants to really see the God state of nobody. If you living in Satan's world, that's why distractions, confusion, aberrations, to me, has to continue because that's the way he rules,
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Well, why does the
that's
devil
what I
keep our
was thinking.
people illiterate?
Because he
He says
does
so that he
not
can
want
use
us
you for a
to.
tool and a slave. He keeps
Yes,
them
sir.
blind to themselves so he can. So that's exactly what you're talking about.
Yes.
That's a formula. He has to keep us ignorant and keep us blind because that's how he rules us.
Yes, sir. Okay.
That's the only way he can rule. In order for a lie to exist, it has to keep the truth from coming to the surface, correct?
Yes, sir. I thought about what he said with this not allowing any light to come in.
Yes.
So they stay in darkness. Yes, sir. That was my first time encountering something like that of that magnitude. And to the point where if it's a new medication out, he would even try it on one of the patients, and they died from it because he was experimenting. I can experiment with new drugs.
Mm-hmm.
See what this do, and then the person end up losing their lives. Yes, sir. I just thought about that as you all were talking. You know. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Sister Anya.
Sister Denise's comment made me think of another level on which they um, practice their technology and have us thinking that everything is okay when it's really not. They'll give you blood pressure medication, which controls you. Now you're under the control of the medication to control what is normally controlled by the body, by the mind and the body. And so when you go to the doctor for your regular checkups, and he wants to see your chart of, your blood pressure readings, and you say, oh, it's been, 127, 132, 115. And so the doctor says, oh, you're doing very well. No problems here. And so you come away thinking that, you're doing well, you're doing much better, you're getting better, when really you're not. If you stop taking that medication, your blood pressure is going to jump up 170, 180, 190. You're not really doing any better. You're just being controlled by that medication. So we're tricked again by this wicked enemy.
Yes, ma'am. If you're driving down the highway and you have a low oil alarm that comes on in your vehicle and the light comes on and starts buzzing, and that buzzing is annoying, if you pop the fuse out, now you don't have the light and now you don't have the buzzing, so that annoyance is not there. Have you solved the problem? Anyone?
Absolutely not.
No.
No.
Because if you keep traveling, what's going to happen to the engine?
But it's gonna blow.
It's going to seize up.
Mm-hmm.
So the pulling of the fuse only turned off the car, sending you the signal that something is wrong. But if you turn off the signal, it doesn't mean that what's wrong with the car has been fixed. It means now you don't receive the signal anymore. But the same thing it is with the human body. signs and symptoms take place to give us the warning signs that something internally is out of balance. And when we take certain medications, now granted, there's some points where medication serves a purpose, but we also have to look at the fact that in some instances, medication turns off the signs and the symptoms. Then we think, okay, I feel much better now. And then we continue with the behavior that's making us sick to begin with, correct?
Yes, sir.
So then what happens if you don't get a chance to get that medication anymore, or your body gets to a point where that medication doesn't work? Well, the doctor has another type of prescription he's going to give you. That's just going to do the same thing all over again, correct?
Worse. It's going to be worse.
Exactly. Okay. So now what is the optimum goal of processing? Now, everything that I try to do now, I try to do it as a cycle of action because it just helps me to remember. So here's one instance where one thing L. Ron Hubbard taught about cycles of action has helped me to understand other concepts. But the optimum goal of processing is what? When we're auditing, we're observing the aberrated behavior, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then what happens is when you observe the aberrated behavior, that's called dramatization. Now, dramatization in Dianetic language is what? Lost the knowledge of himself and is living a beast life in the language of our teachings, correct?
Correct.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so savage in our language could be valence in Dianetics. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay, because if we think back on our time track and the individuals that did certain things to us, would we not consider them to be a savage?
Yes.
But now, do we have some of those characteristics in the present time that we dramatize?
Yes.
When we cuss someone out, do we cuss them out sometimes like Big Mama?
Mm-hmm.
There's times if I get to a certain point, I channel the spirit of my dad, who was a bona fide greatest man. I mean, I love my father to death, don't get me wrong, but he was a certified bona fide hell raiser. And sometimes I tell people all the time, my father's name was James Dobbins. And I tell people all the time, you know, I have a doctorate degree from James Dobbins University, meaning I carry on the family tradition of raising hell if you get me to that point. But when that happens, what are we doing? We're dramatizing these valences. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So after we observe the aberrated behavior, so we're identifying the valence or the dramatization. Now we also, in auditing, we're identifying the elements that make up the mental equation along the time track. So that's really what we're doing. If you've ever taken someone in auditing, and the first thing you do is you take them into pleasure moments, what we're doing is, he calls it tuning up the perceptics. You remember hearing that, tuning up the perceptics?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, what we're doing is we're seeing if the visio and the acoustics and the ability to grab perceptics, if we have what they call a wide open case or an occluded case. So we're identifying the elements. What are we doing? We're really, on one level, in Dianetics, it's called perceptics. In the language of Islam, we're saying we're reading a book. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Sure.
So when we're auditing, if we were to describe auditing in the language of our teachings, we would say that we're reading a person's book. Okay. And what do? We're identifying the source of the aberration. Isn't that the whole goal of auditing?
Absolutely.
Okay. But now in Dianetics, these are called implants, correct?
Yes.
In our lessons, that's called the needle in the brain. Isn't that what happened on Patmos?
Yes.
Okay, and we covered that probably a couple of months ago. We talked about how Patmos represents the mind. And we have these 4 labors in our mind that keep us aberrated. Do y'all remember that one?
Yes, sir. I remember it.
Okay. In the Holy Quran, in Surah 50, if you start at Surah 50, verse 16, and go down a little ways, it talks about the driver and the witness. And And when you look at the word driver and you look up that word in Arabic, it's really synonymous, and it's actually describing what would be in Dianetics, the reactive mind. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
So
sir.
can we see how Dianetics, our teachings, and the Holy Quran actually have ARC with one another?
Yes. Yes.
And then once you identify the source of the aberration, what do we do now? We have to restore the individual to the optimum mental state. So really in auditing, what we're doing is we're manifesting the God that's buried under the reactive mind. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
Okay. And once you manifest, you can bring someone into the light of manifesting God, then that person is free from the pharmaceutical industry now. So they don't really want to make gods. They want to keep people enslaved.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Oh.
They don't want us fasted because, when you look at what's taking place right now, everyone is plagiarizing the teachings, intermittent fasting and all this other stuff. This is all how to eat to live that we've been getting years ago. But now if they can control the dynamic, so now you have individuals that are paying all this money to get on these dietary supplements and dietary plans, when all you gotta do is just read How to Eat to Live.
True.
Because if you study fasting, one of the things that takes place during fasting, especially 3-day fast, that they don't want you to know about this, because then they can't give you a prescription for fasting because you ain't got to pay. I fast. I ain't got to pay for that. You don't have to write me no script to fast.
I'm out of money.
Bust it up.
But here's what happens. One of the things that takes place during fasting, and maybe Wednesday or another Wednesday, we'll go a little bit deeper into this. Your body goes into a process called autophagy. Now, the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad didn't teach about that because it wasn't necessary for us to know that. We just heard and obeyed. Fasting and individuals healed and got better, correct?
Correct.
Okay. But now when your body is in the process of autophagy, which happens approximately 24 to 48 hours after fasting, what the body does is it takes the stuff that's in the body that's serving no purpose, that doesn't really need to be there. And instead of throwing it out, the body breaks it down and takes the parts it can recycle. It builds new proteins, it builds new molecules, and then throws out the trash. So the body has a way of recycling debris into useful material to then use that to begin to heal the body. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
See, the only thing is we're not disciplined in our fasting. But that's the healing. But again, they can't, they could write a script. They could say, well, I need you to fast for 3 days, but then you don't have to go nowhere to fill that prescription.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Did someone have their hand up? I thought I saw a hand go up.
Yes.
Go ahead, Denise.
Yeah, okay. All of it's true. I was looking over my notes when you did the driver and the witness, and I was thinking about, that's what people say when they start losing it. You driving me crazy. You gonna drive me to drink it.
Mm-hmm.
And I was saying, that these words drive me off the cliff or whatever. These are inputs that let you know you're going there, wherever there is.
Mm-hmm.
That you're about to go there. So it's a drive. It's like there's no speed limit on this driving that you're being driven toward or to. Oh my God. I'm seeing it. And yeah, it's all about the money. That's what I wanted to say. I can't get you with the drugs, if you start fasting, and then the food, you ain't spending all your money for food because you're not eating all
Exactly.
the time.
And then you have to go buy, you only got to pay $15 for a dozen of eggs.
Yeah. Oh, is it $15 now?
I don't know.
It was 11. It was
Just saying.
$11. Okay,
Yeah.
it went up $4 more. Yes, sir. So, yes, sir, because nobody wants you restored.
That's right.
Oh my God. It's like leave you in that state where everything can happen to you of no good.
Mm-hmm.
No manipulate. That's a slave-like state, isn't it, Brother Lukman? Just leave it. Leave it. That's a good slave. Just respond and no conscience behind it, nothing. Just react. React.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yes, sir. That was my cognition with that driver. I see why people say that you driving me insane, driving me crazy. Yes, there's always something that push you to the edge. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Why does the devil keep our people illiterate? That's a formula. That's just not something that we need to memorize and recite. There's a formula in that to explain a multitude of things. So when we restore the individual to the optimal mental state, in Dianetics, that's called clear. In the Holy Quran, it's called the purified ones. And in our lessons, that's called civilized people. Does that make sense? One having knowledge, wisdom, understanding, culture, refinement, and is not savage, that's a clear.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, did I hear Sister Shayla in the background?
I am.
Assalamu alaikum, Sister Shayla.
Walaikum salam.
I hope we're getting a little better with the illness.
We are. We are.
Okay, I hear it in the voice.
Mhm.
But the tone is up.
Praises be to Allah.
Okay. Sister Ania.
I just wanted to quickly say, with everything that the enemy is doing, all of his practices, it made me think of the phrase that he has cut off every avenue of light. So if it's through the food, through the water, through what we take in visually, watching the TV, listening on the radio, whatever it is, coming through the air that we breathe, everything that would bring us any kind of light that would improve our condition in any way, they have attacked that to cut off any nourishment coming to us in any form or fashion.
Mm-hmm. Yes, ma'am. But then again, he's doing his job. That's what he's supposed to do. That's what he's supposed to do. Let's look at processing as a cycle. First, start of the process is start, right? Everything that we do, if you understand the concept of a cycle of action and you apply this to everything that you do, you'll begin to see that your recall of information will begin to improve. Okay, at least I have. I've observed it in my own studies. Excuse me, but with the processing, we begin with the PC, and then what do? We build data. How do we build data? As we go back in the time track, we're asking questions and we're collecting perceptives. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay. When we say, well, go back to when you had dinner last night. Are you there? Begin at the beginning and recount it. Where are you sitting? We speak, even though we're talking about something that happened last night, we're speaking in the present perfect tense. What color is the fridge? What color is the table? Who is sitting there with you? And as we're collecting the perceptics, we're gathering data. And what we're really doing is we're gathering attention units to make this specific event more real. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Go ahead, Brother Wadu.
Sir, I just have a question.
Mhm.
As you mentioned the time track, does it matter where on the time track a person's aberration or trauma may have occurred. Let's say, for instance, it wasn't something that happened in early childhood, but after the person may have been an adult or at some later period. So does it matter where on the time track that a perceptic made its impact? Thank you.
Oh no, sir. That's a great question, because this is how the mechanism of the mind works. When you start someone in session, their file clerk will bring you to a certain point. And if you've noticed, there have been times when we have discussed certain things in the Zoom meetings, your mind has automatically gone back to certain events in your past. Has that happened to you? I'm not speaking to everybody.
Yes, it has.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Has anyone in any of the Zoom meetings we had, has any past thoughts come to the surface of things that you haven't thought about in 20 or 30 years?
Yes, sir. Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Your mind, your file clerk will take you to those events. Now, here's how the mechanism of the mind works. As you're recounting certain events, if the file clerk brought you there, then there's something that you need to deal with. But now, as you're recounting and recounting and recounting and recounting, go back to the beginning, go over it again, pick up whatever additional data you can contact. If you see that the person, and you see by little signs, you might see the chin quiver, the lip quiver, you see you're right at the point of getting some emotion, but you can't, for some reason, you can't get that thing to break. One of the things they say is ask the individual, is there an event similar to this further back on the track? And 9 times out of 10, the person will sit there and they'll say, yes. You got to go back, because now you have a chain. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes.
The file clerk will bring you to the chain. And then with the processing, the auditor is observing, using the tech, grabbing whatever attention unit you can grab. And if you can't get any charge released from this part of the chain, you got to see if you can go back a little bit further. And I remember as clear as day, it was I think it was 2011. I was or 2010, 2011. I was completing my hours to get my gold seal, finish the drills. And I remember auditing a brother. The brother was probably in his 60s. And he had a situation that we were going over the data, and I had him recount it, and I could see that he was almost there, and he couldn't. It wouldn't break. And then in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, there's something about this situation. It has something to do with hospital. And I said, okay, is there a situation like this similar to something else? He said, yes. And this idea popped in his head automatically. He went all the way back to the age of 5. And when we hit that, now again, this brother was in his 60s, so we traveled back in time about 55 years. And when I said, brother, begin at the beginning, recount it. When he started recounting that brother cried like a baby. I'll never forget it. And then a week later, maybe about 2 weeks later, it was Savior's Day. And I remember seeing the brother, he was vending at a table, and the brother looked like he was 10 years younger. So that's a long-winded answer to your question, Brother Wadu. The file clerk will take you where you need to go. The auditor's job is to take over the steering wheel and try to see how far back you can go to get to what they call that basic. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Did that clear up the concept?
It does. I also had a viewer, and I'm trying to get clarity on, for the individual that is being audited, if their events happened at a later stage of their life, as opposed to at an early stage. does that have any impact on the one being audited? The fact that, well, maybe life was great growing up, but then at 20, events started to impact them.
Okay.
But they were already past some of those, what we call formative stages.
Okay. Yes, sir. It would just say that the basic on one of those chains, one of the basics on the chain didn't originate until they were in their 20s. That's all. That's where the starting point for that engram would be.
Okay.
There might not be anything further back. And the way you'll know that is that if you hit that basic, you'll see, has anyone ever experienced being audited and then you had a cry that was so powerful where you almost went through the whole box? They give you a little box of Kleenex, but you felt so relieved after that?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes,
One
sir.
of them real good snot and crying situations.
Yeah, that's a real cry.
Some of us are engrams. We have certain engrams that the implants didn't take place till we were 20. We have some implants that probably didn't take place until 30. So that is possible, Brother Wadu. It might not be anything further back, but there more than likely there's going to be other things that the file clerk will bring you to, because when you look at the principle that's found in English C lesson number 1, why does he fear not a grown man? Because he was taught to eat the wrong food when he was a child or a baby. To me, that represents that our behaviors now in present time are rooted in something that was implanted when we were children.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Brother Lukman?
Yes.
So, oh, I'm sorry, Brother Wadu. I was just gonna add something to that. Even if is the going back to like 3 or 4 or whatever, is it better to get it at that point? You know, if you can go back that far to get it at that point, because that's the one that's been held the longest, or it, you know, it doesn't matter. I was thinking if you can get it in the childhood, that will be a big release, because you're a big man now. Why does he fear not? Since he's a big man. And a lot of food's been eaten between then and now. And you know, you understand what I'm saying?
Yes, ma'am. I understand.
It's better
if you have if someone keeps adding weight, okay, the heaviest point on that would be at the base, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. When you look at our time track and you look at some of the heavy charges that we have, these charges, and I promise you soon I'll deal with, and this is Charlotte keeps bringing this up, with the concept of sequence. In mathematics, you have what's called sequence and you have series. These two concepts go together. A sequence is just a sequence of numbers. The series is the value if you add all those numbers together. Okay, and I use that to explain that a chain is a sequence of events. The series is the amount of charge that chain has. And if you can get to the basic, and if you can eliminate the basic,
okay,
L. Ron Hubbard says that all the locks will begin to blow.
Okay.
Because what's holding us is there's some things that's holding us that we can identify with, but some of us have something funky in our mind. We know something's not right, but we don't know the source of it. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And once we can find out what that thing is and identify that, have you ever had an aha moment and you said, oh, that's why such and such and so, and then everything else beyond that just seems that it doesn't matter anymore because you got to the root of it, right?
Right. Yes, sir.
Well, that's what the auditing does. If we can get to the basic, everything, if we can go the further back we can go and address that, because all the locks are supported by the engram.
Okay.
If you blow, you're that movie, not the movie, but the game, what's it called, Chenga? If you pull out the thing and the whole thing topples over,
Yeah, that's what I gave my grandson for his birthday.
Okay, well,
I'm trying to open
maybe
it.
now, we had that radio in the head. That's that Chenga. That's the base of that tower is the engram. Everything above that's the locks. And
Yes.
if you disturb the base, the whole thing topples. That's the time track. We'll use Chenga as a demo kit.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Does that clear it up?
Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
Okay. Praise be to Allah. Sister Ania, and then Sister Charlotte.
Yes, sir. In reference to Brother Wadud's statement about an engram that came later on, and that, you know, maybe this person had a very happy childhood, you know, both parents and all of that, everything was fine while they were young. I wondered about, and I saw the title of the book, Psychological Chains of Slavery. And I wondered about, for Black people in America, in the Western Hemisphere, those who, you know, are the children of those that endured physical slavery, how would that come into play for somebody that, you know, for someone who doesn't have those childhood engrams, you know, they had a happy childhood and all of that, but yet they are the children of slaves. Would that have some impact there?
That actually is a very good question. We'll hit it from two different angles real quick. There's a sister doctor by the name of Dr. Joy LaGrue, and she has a video. She has a couple of videos on YouTube called Post-Traumatic Slave Disorder, and she goes into the science of that. Science has proven, and it's called transgenerational trauma, and this is information that's actually passed down genetically. So some of the trauma we suffer from, and L. Ron Hubbard says this also, there were some times that L. Ron Hubbard says certain cases couldn't be cleared because the auditor was only focusing on engrams that were received in this lifetime. Now, that's, you know, now you have to start to ask yourself the question, do you believe that we existed before this? That's a whole nother discussion. I don't know if I'm qualified. I haven't heard the minister teach on that, so I'm not going to. But I will say that the minister has made this statement, it's in Closing the Gap. He says sometimes a person is prepared, I think he says, thousands of years before they're born. Has anyone ever seen that in Closing the Gap?
Yes, I.
Okay, just want to make sure. So for that to take place, to me, that would imply that there's certain things that take place before this lifetime. Then there's a scripture in the Bible that says, before you were in the wombs of your mother, I knew you. Okay, that's the second thing. The third thing is the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad says in Message to the Black Man, that first God who created himself in triple darkness is no longer here, but his person exists in his people today. To me, that implies that the Thetan, the life force that exists in this physical body, existed before this physical body, possibly in a different physical body. I'm just saying it's a possibility. How else could the person of God travel through time from 76 trillion years ago until the year 2023? Just something to think about. Okay. So the individual that might have had a good childhood, there's a possibility that they might have some leftover trauma from something that was passed down. Because if you look at the child might have had a great childhood, but I'll use myself as an example. I know my father went through some hell, and I know my mother went through some hell. And this is, again, my personal opinion. I believe that every generation is giving a set of problems to solve. And if they're able to solve them, that's good. If they're not, they pass them down to the offspring, like passing the baton. And I believe that in this day and time, our ancestors have given us the baton. And right now we are running what's called the anchor in the race. And an anchor in the race is the one who runs the last lap. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir. I used to run track.
And so if you
Yes,
run
sir.
track, the anchor is the one that runs the last lap. Right now, we're so close to the end. We represent the sum total of all of our ancestors. And just mock this up in your mind. Mock them up in a way of them looking at us, rooting for us to finish the race on behalf of them. That's just kind of like the way I'm looking at it. I kind of look at running the race. I see my mom, I see my dad, I see my grandfather, I see relatives that, that are no longer here. They passed down what they passed down genetically. So the book that I have was a book given to me from my ancestors. And now I'm the one that has to run the anchor, the last length of the race, because the race is almost over, if that makes any sense. Does that answer your question, Sister Anya?
Yes, sir, it does. Thank you.
Praise be to God. I give these long-winded answers, but go ahead, Sister Charlotte.
Yes, sir. When you and a couple of previous speakers were speaking, it brought, I wanted to know, engrams, some of them, are they crafty enough to duck and dodge questions of the auditor? Because I was in a session a few months ago, and I felt a little offended. My auditor I took it as she was saying that I wasn't working the process because I must not want to be clear. But she was asking me some questions, and I could not remember. But as soon as our session was over, every question that she asked me, immediately I had an answer to. And I wasn't sure why in the session I wasn't able to recall. I don't think I was purposely playing games. So, and I heard you mention a few sessions ago that some of the engrams do stuff like that. They duck and dodge and hide and do stuff. So what if, I don't really know what my question is. How do I find a good auditor that knows what my engrams are doing?
Okay, that's a perfectly good question. Now, I didn't hear all the way in which it was said, but I'll say this: this is the feeling I'm getting based on how you're posing the question. It almost sounds like that you were invalidated, and that's a no-no. We don't evaluate and we don't invalidate. So even in my mind, if I'm posing questions, if you're ducking and dodging, I have to understand that it's not you that's ducking and dodging, it's your reactive mind. But if I make it seem like it's you that's doing it, that brings up some more restimulation. Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay. So now what I have to do as a skillful auditor, I have to listen for the engrammic language. And if I believe there's some engrammic language there, I have to continue the process. I can't accuse you and say, well, I'm asked these questions. It don't seem like you want to go clear because because I have to understand if there's ducking and dodging, it's not you that's doing it.
Okay.
Okay. So if that's how it happened, then I don't want to say it's the auditor's fault, but the auditor can't. There's certain things an auditor is not supposed to say because, especially you dealing with Black folks, you're gonna irk my nerve, and then I'm gonna cuss you out, and now no one's getting audited. Okay? Because if you push me there, it's gonna happen. You understand what I'm saying, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, so whoever does the processing can't enforce something on you, meaning you know, this isn't working because you're not being honest, and they can't invalidate your response. They have to be skillful enough to identify what's taking place, realize that they're talking to the reactive mind, and then find a way to get around whatever these engramming commands. You have what's called bouncers. You have the deniers, the holders, the groupers, the misdirectors. You have something called the lie factory. I just read about this one recently, and it's just, you know, it's just no matter what you do, you fabricate. But a skilled auditor is supposed to be able to detect that. Does that answer your question?
It does. So
Did you feel invalidated in the way that they were saying what they were saying or how they were saying it?
I I just I don't think I felt invalidated, but it gave me food for thought. It made me think, so how do I pick a better auditor? What do I need to do some interviews, and how do I know if I'm getting the right auditor? Because I don't want to waste time. Okay. And I don't necessarily want all my business out there with any and everybody.
Yes, ma'am.
I want to get done. So, but if most people know me, I am a jokester. I tell jokes. I like to laugh. And if you can't figure that out, then we're gonna have a problem.
But now let me pose this question. Have you brought up to the individual the effect that those questions had on you?
I did. We had a talk afterwards, and that's what made me think. I'm like, is something else going on? Because I wasn't doing it intentional. I could not recall situations that she was asking me to recall at that moment. But as soon as our session ended, everything popped up. That's and so I don't know.
No, that's how the file clerk works. And I'll give you an example. Do you have the Dianetic, the manual of how to do the processing that has all the steps? There's a step.
I'm sorry. No, sir, I don't. I haven't gotten to that point yet.
Okay. When an auditor completes the process, there's a book. There's a standard operating procedure of how to do it. And when an individual, when you're dealing with what's called an occluded case, if you can't get any information, L. Ron Hubbard called it greasing the rails. And greasing the rails is like, for those that are in areas where there's a lot of snow. If you're stuck, you want and you get someone to push, you push back, the car rocks, you push. What you're doing is you're building a momentum to get that person out of the stuck snowbank, right? Okay. You do the same thing in Dianetic processing. So if you have someone into a situation they can't recount, you can bring them back to present time and go over a pleasure moment. So when you're going over the pleasure moment, what you're doing is you're grabbing attention units. Then you try to go back to that point. And if they continue to be blocked, now you have what's called an occluded case. They can say something like, okay, do you hear something? Do you see something? What you're doing is you're trying to find one little shred of something. And if you can find one little perceptic, now you begin to build on that one perceptic and see if you can grow that perceptic into a particular situation. And if you build up enough attention units, something will click in where the pre-clear might say, or the person being audited might say, oh, wait a minute. Yes, I do remember such and such, so and so. It was, and then all of a sudden, it's like unclogging the sink. In other words, does that make sense?
Yeah. Yes, sir. Yes,
you'll start
sir.
to get some flow.
Yes, sir.
That's how that's supposed to be done based on the standard operating procedure in the book. Okay.
So most auditors are trained if they, I should say, are most auditors trained if they encounter some anger in these sessions? That's not gonna like shake them up.
No, the anger is not yours. The anger is that's the reactive mind. That's you. Have you ever experienced someone who got caught doing something they had no business doing, and even though they were guilty, they got angry at you because you found out?
Absolutely.
The reactive mind does the same thing. The reactive mind is angry. It's not the individual, because when you're in auditing, you're in session, you're dealing with the individual's reactive mind. You're dealing with that genetic entity. You're dealing with the devil in that individual, in other words. So the anger is not necessarily directed. It's no different than when Jesus removed devils by the woman at the well. It said all the devils came out and they were cursing him. Jesus was processing the woman by the well. But that anger is what's contained in that engram, if that makes any sense.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. All right. Inshallah, I will find a qualified auditor. Get ready, Sister Angela.
Uh-oh. Sister Ania.
As I listened to that question, it reminded me of this, some other events, not necessarily auditing. Sometimes it has occurred in an auditing session, but sometimes just in life in general, when you're trying to remember something or recall something, and the facts just don't come through, or the answer doesn't come through. And it could even be, could be any example of anything. It could be as simple as something as trying to remember where you put something, and you try, the more and more you try to think where you put it, the less information comes through. And then maybe the next day, all of a sudden, it pops into your mind.
Mm-hmm.
Or sometimes I might be in study group, or somebody might ask me, you're in a discussion on a very nice, good topic.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're asked a specific question, this happens to me often, my mind just is like a complete blank. It's like there's just nothing there
Mm-hmm.
at all, and it sometimes in the past has left me feeling embarrassed because I couldn't, it's like I don't have a response, and it's just like, am I dumb or something like that?
Mm-hmm.
Which that's another engram. I just caught that one because that's a word my mother used to use in reference to herself. About dumb.
You found a circuit.
I did, yes, sir. But then maybe later on or the next day, my mind is flooded with things. It's like, oh, I could have said this, I could have said that. So it's not that I'm stupid or that I don't know. The information was there, but it's like my file clerk had to go and dig deep for whatever reason to get that information. And another experience that I had, and again, this was before Minister Farrakhan introduced Dianetics to us. I was in a holistic school, and I've mentioned this, I think probably a year or two. I think it might have been, I don't know if it was your program or Brother Batin's at STW. But during a life coaching session where we had to, the participants in the class, we had to team up to practice on one another to learn the technique that was in question. And so this particular technique, the coach would ask you the questions about things from your past, but what they had is like whatever comes up, whatever comes up, you just go with it, right? So when it was my turn, she asked me, what did I see? And all I could see was all of this little swirly stuff. you know, I couldn't really see anything other than just all this little swirly stuff. So the next thing I knew, these words came tumbling out of my mouth when she said, well, who are you? And I said, seaweed cloud. And I immediately thought, how stupid, how silly, what is she going to think of me? You know, what is a seaweed cloud? That's so silly. But you know what she did? She went with it. And she said, okay, seaweed cloud. And she addressed me as seaweed cloud because that's what I had said. And, you know, and she just went on to the next question. But each time she had just addressed me as seaweed cloud. And eventually I addressed myself as something different. And she went with that. And then I changed it a little bit while later I changed into something else. And then eventually I said, I am wise woman. And so that's who this character that was coming through, which was, you know, part of myself. It was actually me as a wise woman, but then in part of it was she asked another question. I said, well, it's because she, meaning this is wise woman now speaking, saying, because she doesn't listen to me. So in actual reality, what it was is that God part of myself saying that me, the other self, does not listen to the wise wisdom that's coming through from the God, you know, and I realized that. But I think because she did not, you know, titter or laugh or anything when I said initially said seaweed cloud, and she just went with the whole thing, started to make me feel comfortable in being all of these different characters, because what these characters were doing is like they didn't feel comfortable coming out initially. They wanted to hide. They were hiding, seeing was it safe to come out, and when they felt that it was okay, that's when they started morphing into something else until eventually wise woman presented herself. So answer to, was it Sister Charlotte who raised the question, or another sister?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you for sharing.
That's what I thought about when you said that. You all of these thoughts came to you afterwards. It could be you may not have felt that bond with the auditor. So it may not be, you know, I don't know how long she had been an auditor, whether she was a good auditor or not, but you just may not have felt the bond with her at that particular moment that you felt comfortable enough. So the file clerk, knowing that, held back. And then sometimes it's just, you know, it's all part of the processing that even after you've had your auditing session, the process still continues. The session that you had is still replaying in your mind, and so you're still in process. And later on, the file clerk says, okay, well, there was something else there. Let me present it to you, and it pulls it up and brings it to the forefront. And there you start connecting with all of it's what's the term, Brother Lukeman? The secondaries. Is it the secondaries?
You talking about the secondary engrams?
Right, they come up as secondaries when you self-process. You're not really, I guess you are self-processing.
Are you talking about when you like straight wire and lock scanning?
Right, but you know, lock scanning. That's it, lock scanning. Where you start pulling these things up yourself, but it's still part of it's like the end part of the process from the session that you had. It's an ongoing process. just like how we come into the nation, and even, no matter how many years you've been in, we're still really in processing.
Yes, ma'am.
So
Yes, ma'am. Are you
Thank
finished,
you.
Sonia?
yes, sir.
Okay. 2 quick points. One is sometimes when we have like a mental occlusion, the processing kind of starts the process. And then a day or two later, certain thoughts might come to mind, but it took it 2 days to travel through all the stuff that we have up top. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Just this last week, I can't remember. I was studying something, and then a day or two later, I'm here at work, and I'm on the ambulance. That was years ago. I'm on the fire truck, and I'm traveling to a call, and I had an aha moment about something I had studied the day before, and I'm thinking, why in the world did that come to me now? I'm in the process of going to this call, but that information popped in my head at that time. It's just that it popped up at that time because that's when it happened. All of us, I think, have computers or you have cell phones. Have you ever experienced where you can't use your cell phone for a quick minute because it's rebooting the system?
Yes.
And you have to wait till the system is rebooted until you can use your computer and your phone now? Have you ever experienced that?
Yes.
And have you ever experienced that when you now use your phone or your computer, it runs a little bit faster because the system has been updated?
Yes, sir.
Okay, same thing happens with the mind. We go through processing. At that moment in time, stuff might not click. We get out of session, we go home, X, Y, and Z happens, and all of a sudden, something just seems like it clicks. Our mind is like a computer. And sometimes the system just gets rebooted. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Sister Denise, then Sister Angela, then we're going to try to see if we can go ahead and land this plane.
Yes, sir. Real quick.
Mhm.
My relative, I hadn't spoken with them for quite a while, and they said, when are we gonna get together so I can talk to you? So I'm thinking, okay, we're getting ready to talk, regular talk. And as we're sitting there, you know, I I didn't have my auditor's hat on. I just thought we was gonna have a homecoming or something, okay? And then I realized that that's what they wanted, an auditing session. But they didn't say that. They like, well, we ain't seen each other. So I'm talking to them regular. I guess if you could, as an audit, if you can talk to people regular, and then it turned into a session, and they became very angry with me. I said, I thought we were just talking. I was just listening to you. Yeah, but you don't talk like that. I said, like what? I mean, we just talking regular people, you and I. And it was like, I think maybe I just need to just put my auditor's hat on and just never take it off. I mean, because I thought I could be normal with it, but it wasn't normal, Brother Lukman. I mean, it wasn't normal. I was like, maybe you need to see a therapist, a psychiatrist. I said, I didn't say a psychiatrist, I said a therapist, somebody you can talk to. Because they didn't tell me that's what they wanted me to do. Then I would have prepared myself. So I said, okay, just keep your orders head on, no matter who it is, no matter what they want to talk about. Yes, that's all I wanted to share. Because it kind of blew me away, like, hey, why didn't you say you wanted to be audited? You sound like we having a regular conversation. Is there a regular conversation for an auditor? When you listening to people and they're in trouble or they need help, is it ever regular for an auditor?
Here's what comes to mind as you're speaking. And Sister Angela, help me out with this if you could. I believe it's in the first part of Closing the Gap, where the minister is speaking about Jesus, saying that in the beginning, Jesus was the one doing the healing. but at a certain time, the apostles were bringing those that need to be healed to Jesus, but Jesus was getting to a point where he wanted the apostles to start doing the healing. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Is that at the beginning of Closing the Gap?
I believe so.
Okay.
And I'm actually preparing for it, but yes, sir, I believe
Okay.
so.
So I say that to say this, as you were speaking, sister, my thought is that when brothers and sisters speak to us, we have to align our mind so much with the minister that when they speak to us, they almost feel like they're sitting down with him. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
And I know that's going to take some time on our behalf because we got to close that gap. We got to grow into that. But we have to be to our friends and family, especially this time period now, we have to be to them like the minister is to us. So no, we don't ever take our auditor's hat off because the minister don't ever take off his Messiah hat.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Because it was an experience for me. I said, okay.
I understand. Yes,
that hat on 24/7.
right. Go ahead, Sister Angela.
Yes, sir. I think the beautiful part about being an auditor is not just the fact that we can help other people. And no, I never take my auditor's hat off. And I say that because it's not only for guided conversation and straight wire, because unfortunately, this pandemic has kind of changed the language, and we have to slowly change the language back. If we are doing straight wires and guided conversation, we are not processing. We are not having sessions. That's not the proper language. And I wanted to ask Sister Charlotte, because I caught some of what she said, but I didn't know if she was actually in a session doing book one processing, or was it a straight wire? Because that's the world of difference. But I do know the other upside of using the tool 24/7 is you have an ability that auditors have is another form of rising above emotions into the thinking of God.
Yes, ma'am.
Because we cannot get emotionally connected to the information that's coming at us, even if it is in an attacking way towards us. I talk to auditors, and usually in a straight wire, usually within the first sentence is the answer to the problem. And usually that first sentence pisses the person off, or they absolutely deny it. And eventually we'll find ourselves right back to that first question, because this is what the auditor's seen in the beginning. Our job is to see what you don't see and bring it to your attention. So if we are having guided conversation in straight wires and processing, L. Ron Hubbard said there's no such thing as a bad session, because it takes the charge off of the session. It takes the charge off of the pre-clean. Even if the session did not move the lock, or they didn't go far down the chain, it took some form of the charge off of it. If we find ourselves at the guided conversation and straight wiring conversation, opening things up, that means simply something was open that we didn't see, that we now see. And then we can ask the very cognizant question. We are aware enough to say, was I hiding that? Or was it revealed to me now? You know what I'm saying? So hopefully that can help Sister Charlotte and whomever that may have had these, because usually when somebody is not closed, a session wasn't closed properly, it's usually some physical pain associated with that. They leave with a headache, or they leave with some type of ache, or whatever the case may be. So I just wanted to share that.
So, Sister Angela, would you say we have to be like a burning bush?
All the time.
Yes, ma'am. Sister Charlotte.
Yes, just to address Sister Angela's question, up until very recently, I thought every time I was speaking with an auditor, it was an auditing session. But I just realized that those sessions are a straight wire, because unless you are physically in the presence, you can't do auditing over computer.
Right.
And that's what my the session that I was talking about, and this happened several years ago. That So I'm assuming it was straight wiring. I don't think I haven't had a session since the minister introduced auditing way back in 2010, 2011. Yes, sir.
So unless you are on raised couches facing one another with the Holy Quran,
absolutely.
that's not a book one auditing.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead, Brother Wadu.
Yes, sir, and family, very quickly. I just wanted to share from what I heard from Sister Denise, and hoping to help all of you mighty scientists on the line and auditors, etc., from both being a professional in the medical arena. A lot of times I can engage individuals, and I, as the so-called professional, have to gauge, do they really want medical information at this moment, or is this just a friendly discussion? And then sometimes after gauging and assessing that situation, coming from an NOI, FOI perspective, I think about our training in that we are always trying to make friends, but also win over those lost found. So I'm always looking for an opportunity as well to share whatever insights I may have if that individual seems open to what I may want to offer them at the moment. So that's just something I thought about as far as an auditor, professional, and being on our post as FOI and NOI members. Assalamu alaikum.
Before we finish up what we're doing, because we did not get a chance to record the meeting on Wednesday, when everyone put in your phone numbers, it did not record. So I'm going to ask the believers again, since we are recording, if you could put your phone numbers in the chat. And the reason for this is, God willing, at some point during Savior's Day, we're going to try to organize where all of us can do like a little meet and greet and get a chance to meet one another. Because, again, I could walk past you, some of you on Savior's Day wouldn't even know, because some of you have never seen. But being that it's going to be our Savior's Day, it would just bring me a great amount of joy if all of us as believers that have been in the Zoom meetings for the past year, 2 years, or even more through Brother Batin's group, that we now have this one-time opportunity for Savior's Day to get a chance to actually meet one another. So if you're interested in that, go ahead and put your phone number in the chat. A couple of days before Savior's Day, I'll send out a text message to try to see if we can pinpoint a certain location where possibly we can meet one another after the Juma service, being that all of us more likely might be at Juma, even if it's just for a 10-minute, just to give one another greetings. That would just be a wonderful thing. So if you could just put that in the chat. But let me go ahead and finish this so we can wrap this up, because I know we have the other Zoom meeting at 8 o'clock, and I don't want to hold this past that point to allow us to get to the next Zoom meeting. Let me finish this up. So when we do a processing as a cycle, we begin with the PC, the pre-clear. We're building data, we're collecting perceptics, we're identifying the circuits. As we're going through the processing, when we can identify a circuit, more than likely you have what's called the repeater technique, and you'll have you say repeat that, and then 9 times out of 10, the phrase that's being stated is actually a phrase that's coming out of the reactive mind or the engram bank, and that, if we can identify the circuit, then we can identify the person who actually implanted that. Does that make sense? You with me?
Yes, sir.
Because that's really the goal. The goal is to get that circuit, to identify the person, and then we realize that the whispering of the slinking devil that whispers into the hearts of men from among the jinn and the men, that voice that whispers in us that causes what's called the compulsions and the things we do, we realize that that's not us talking to us. That's a circuit, something from our time track that's guiding us. And what we're doing is we're falling victim to a circuit which is guiding us to do certain crazy things. Does that make sense? Okay.
Okay.
In other words, the voice doesn't, the voice, sometimes we do things, but it's not, it's us that's doing it, but there's a voice that's part of a circuit that's putting that suppressor on us. And that's what a compulsion is. It's that voice. It's like when the child wants a cookie or something, and the child keeps asking over and over and over and over again. And then finally we might be one of those parents that finally give and say, they just take cookie and just gone and stop bugging me. Well, now the child bugged you enough to get the cookie. That's how the reactive mind works. Does that make sense? You with me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Some of us didn't get the cookie. Some of us got the switch, but that's another type of processing. So then after you identify the circuits, now the goal is we want to remove the charge, or we want to reduce the engram. And then after we reduce the engram, remove the charge, now we're restoring the individual to an optimal mental state. So this is processing put into what we could call a cycle of action. So what is the optimum mental state? 99 attributes of Allah. That's the optimum level. Now, this mathematics as a demo kit, because we're at the end of this, I'm going to save this part. I'm going to save this part for Wednesday. Okay, I'm going to save this part for Wednesday. But there is something, if I could just have just 5 more minutes of your time, I'm going to try to address something else real quick. I just want to cover this one thing. Let me get past that. Let me get past that. Now, you know what? Because of the time, I'll pick this up. Because of the time, I'll do the rest of this, God willing. We'll pick it up. We'll do part 2 on Wednesday. I don't want to hold this too far past time. Out of respect for basically your patience and those that want to move on to the other Zoom meeting. So God willing, Wednesday morning, 10 a.m., we will start part 2. Assalamu alaikum, Brother Eric. You're on mute, brother.
Wa alaikum salam. How is you doing?
I'm doing fine as long as these bells don't hit.
We got that right again.
I'll stay in the firehouse all night. I ain't got no problem doing that.
Good.
So, all right. And Sister Tina, assalamu alaikum. You with us, Sister Tina?
I'm here. My mic.
She must be away from her computer. Okay, so God willing, Wednesday we're gonna go into mathematics as a demo kit. We're gonna still focus on the chapter 4, book 3, chapter 4 on diagnosis. There's some other things we're gonna cover on Wednesday, but I don't want to take us too much further out of respect for time. Yes, ma'am, Sister Tina.
Yes, sir. Walaikum salam, brother Lukman. I couldn't get off of mute.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right. So did we answer all the questions? Did we get any case game? Did we go up the tone scale? How are we feeling right now?
I'm good.
Okay.
Yeah.
All
I
of the
gained a
above
lot.
for me.
Say what, brother Wadu?
All of the above for me.
All the above. You know, when someone had mentioned how something can come up now and you don't get the information until later on, and how we call that an occluded case when we were talking about that earlier. It reminded me, Brother Wadu, you'll be able to follow this perfectly. When a person has an injury to the heart and the signal has a harder time traveling through the scar tissue, you have these different 1st degree, 2nd degree, and 3rd degree heart blocks.
Right.
Brother Doctor. And I was thinking about the same thing. When you have scar tissue on your heart, that's based on injury. And it takes the impulse. It's harder for the impulse to get through the scar tissue. And that produces an irregular heartbeat. And that irregular heartbeat produces various signs and symptoms where the trained doctor can look at an individual and can tell based on the EKG and look at the different rhythm, they can pinpoint the different illnesses and trace it back to the scar tissue that's in the heart. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And that's just how I saw that occluded. The same thing happens in our mind, whereas our memory, we're trying to remember something, and then tomorrow we're doing something, and out of the blue, what someone asked us today, the answer don't come to us until tomorrow. Same mechanism, same process. It's just one is the mind, one is the heart, but the heart really is a demo kit for the mind. And if as we study the heart, we can actually understand how the mind operates. But that's just a thought that came to mind.
And if I could,
go ahead,
I could add,
yes, sir,
to help, as you often study the hormone cortisol, that same effect will happen when there are excess levels of cortisol. So if someone is stressed, sitting taking a test, they may have the answer in their brain, but because of those increased cortisol levels, then the mind will blank out even though the answer is there. And then 5 minutes after the exam, or when they're at a different stage of stress and those levels go down, then the answer will pop into their mind. I just thought I would give that to you as well, because I know you've studied and looked at cortisol a lot.
So what you're saying is when a person is stressed out taking a test, they don't have the ability to rise above emotion into the mind of God. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Absolutely. This enemy's world would put such a stress and burden on something, which really shows that they're not looking for someone that actually knows what they're doing, like a physician that cares about finding treatment and cure. As we talked about early in the discussion, it's to be able to manage symptoms, and anyone can basically do that. But to actually be creative enough to think outside of the box to come up with a real answer and solution to what ails the person is not the objective. So these board exams and different tests aren't looking for physicians that can actually think outside of the box and reach the decisions, but who can just manage under the stresses that this world puts on people. Basically memorize and regurgitate information.
Yes, sir. You were 100% correct. And that leads us into our assignment. So
Brother Luke,
yes,
I'm
Sister
sorry.
Charlotte, go ahead.
Before you end,
Mhm.
you were I've had a clear understanding of a cyst on the external. And since you were talking about the heart and scar tissue, does Dianetics deal with internal organs like that, with assist and healing with Dianetics, like the heart and the veins and stuff internally?
I will answer your question like this. If you have a chance to read a book called, let's see, everywhere I go, I bring this book with me because I'm studying this book right now. It's called The Molecules of Emotion. Okay. The doctor's name is Candace B. Pert. Okay. What she says in this book is actually in agreement with what L. Ron Hubbard taught. And I'll say it like this. There's a connection, she calls it psycho-immunoendocrinology, meaning she's linking the nervous system to the endocrine system to the immune system, making those three things up as one entity. And as you read her information and you study the tech given by L. Ron Hubbard, you will see that part of the reason why we are suffering from the illnesses that we're suffering from is because our mind is being kept in a state that's keeping the body aberrated. Does that answer your question? Or does it answer part of your question?
Oh, yes, sir. Part of it. Yes, sir.
Okay. So here's the other part, hopefully. As in the stress of the body that breaks down the immune system and the endocrine system, you have a chemical called ACTH, and you have cortisol, and you have some other stress hormones. Over a prolonged period of time, these things do damage on the body. They have their place short term. Long term, they do damage on the body. But these chemicals, on one level, they call them neuropeptides. It's just the chemistry of the body that's translating thought into matter. But what we're doing is, because we're thinking wrong, we're transferring wrong thought, and it becomes disease or psychosomatic illnesses. By changing the thought, we're changing the internal environment and thereby changing the chemistry. And what that does is that allows the body to begin to go through a process of natural healing. Some of us remain sick because we have this sick reactive mind. We have these circuits, and these things are what's keeping us sick. The body can heal itself. L. Ron Hubbard doesn't quite teach it quite like that. But I believe that's because the technology, his thoughts and his methodology and the concepts were really, in my opinion, ahead of the technology back then. But when you study the technology now, they're actually in agreement with what he taught back in the 50s and the 60s. Yeah. So I hope that answered the question. By changing our thoughts, we heal our body. And here's the prime example. Look at everything that the minister has gone through over the past 20, 30 years with his health.
Absolutely.
Now, I have more gray hair than the minister. I have a head full of, when I look at the minister, he does not look 90.
No, sir.
I am a firm believer, because he had been in sync with How to Eat to Live all those years leading up to that is one of the things that has allowed him to continue to do and outwork us, even in the midst of his condition with having most of his organs not even in his body. So just by changing our thought, we can heal our organs and heal our body, as long as we're not at a certain point where we're so far beyond that we've just totally just damaged ourselves. But I'm a firm believer now. I'm going back in now, reading How to Eat to Live all over again, in conjunction with the science that really everyone is plagiarizing the messenger's books. I'm a firm believer by thought we can heal our body. I hope that answered your question.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay, praise be to Allah. All right, family. Let us go ahead and wrap it up. And for those that are going to go forth to the closing the gap, I know I'm going to go and try to sit in for a little bit while I got some downtime. I'm thankful to Allah that he blessed us to finish this class and we had no calls. And I'll be even happier if I don't get any calls for the rest of the night. So with that being said and done, inshallah, I will see you in the next Zoom meeting and or see you on Wednesday morning at 10 a.m. And with that, I will dismiss myself and we will go ahead and close out in prayer. Attention prayer. I seek refuge in Allah from the accursed Satan. In the name of Allah, the beneficent and merciful. All praise is due to Allah, Lord of the worlds, the beneficent and most merciful. Master the day of judgment in which we now live, the alone we serve and aid we seek. Please Allah guide us on the straight path, the path upon whom thou hast bestowed favors, not the path upon whom thy wrath is brought down, nor of those who go astray after they have heard thy teaching. Ameen.
Ameen.
Assalamu alaikum, family.
Ameen. Wa alaikum salam, sir.
Inshallah, we'll see you in a few, or we'll see you on Wednesday.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.